So on this brain here, look, come on, look right over here. What you're right here, it's, look, very big. Right? Here, it is small. Okay? And this pin we said is in what? Adi, what we said it is? And we said, by the way, the surface is our medial surface, the superior lateral surface, the orbital, and the tentorial. Reasonable? Give a chance. Okay. Who is on the tentorial surface that's important? Well, the parahippocampal gyrus is very important. Reasonable? Yeah? And the uncus. Okay, so when Joe was around coming in, we were speaking about the uncus. And somebody over here, very good, had said this is, uncus is a rounded elevation that is really, you can call it periamygdala green. It is a green matter that is over the amygdala. Okay? All right? It is primitively a part of what part of the brain? The rhinencephalon. Isn't that so? It's a part of the what? The smell brain, isn't that so? The anterior end, that area is what? The entorhinal cortex. You've heard those terms? Mm-hmm. All right. So olfaction occurs there, reasonable. Olfaction is, so there's a whole area around there because it's pear-shaped. It's called a piriform cortex. Okay, so there's a number of things like a shopping list. A shopping list of the what? The things in there. Okay, so one of the things that comes along there is the olfaction. Through what? Do you know the senior consultant here? So the uncus, reasonable, that's part of that smell brain area, reasonable, and we find that the olfactory bulb comes back. See the olfactory bulb right here? Olfaction is a very important sense, isn't that so? Right, see the olfactory bulb? And will form a structure called the olfactory tract. Reasonable, and Dr. Cruikshank, who is a specialist on this area, is going to tell me that the olfactory tract will come back, okay, and then it's going to come to an area known as the what? Anterior perforated substance, where it's going to divide into medial and lateral olfactory striae, 300 marks. So right here, we can see that it's going to divide into the olfactory tract is dividing into the medial olfactory stria and the lateral olfactory stria, and that's the anterior perforated substance. A very important area because that's the area we said that the internal carotid artery ends, the basal vein of Rosenthal begins, right? And there is something that skirts under that. So if it is going to divide into medial and lateral olfactory striae, reasonable, that area is the olfactory trigone, and that's the anterior perforated substance. A structure is going to skirt under the anterior perforated substance. What important structure is passing under there? Okay? And that's a diagonal band of Broca. Excellent, that's a diagonal band of Broca. 300 marks. And that diagonal band of Broca. So what function is it serving, that diagonal band of Broca?
It's involved in that memory.
The diagonal band of Broca is an output of what structure?
The basic cholinergic forebrain.
The diagonal band of Broca is an output of what structure? Is a massive efferent of what? So this structure has about, let's think of 1, 2, 3, about 4 major efferents. The diagonal band of Broca. So that structure has about 4 big efferents. As you think of the diagonal band of Broca, if you ask Melissa, who is beside me, Melissa will tell you the amygdala. What will she tell you? The amygdala. Reasonable? Mm-hmm. That structure that what is able to detect when there is some danger. Isn't that something that we need to be very careful of? Reasonable? So the amygdala, which underlies the uncus, has as its major outputs 1, the stria terminalis, 2, the ventral amygdala fugal fiber, 3, the diagonal band of Broca, and there are some also amygdalostriate fibers. Reasonable? All right, if you need to know anything more about it, you check John C. Fowler. Okay, he is the expert on it. So lying right here, this prominence that we see, Melissa, is the what? The uncus, right? And that uncus is a part of that area of the piriform area. So just to say now, we go back to this what? Olfactory bulb, all right? And we meet what? The anterior perforated substance dividing into a lateral olfactory stria and a medial olfactory stria. And the medial olfactory stria goes to where? The septal area, okay? And then within that medial olfactory stria, there are some fibers that come like this, look, and go right through a thing called the what? Anterior commissure, and connect us back to the other olfactory bulb. Okay, so this is going to go to the septal area. Reasonable, but some fibers, as that septal area is right where the anterior commissure is, some fibers will go back to inhibit the contralateral olfactory bulb. Reasonable? Okay. The lateral olfactory stria will go to that piriform area. Okay, and then also go where? Where does that lateral olfactory stria go? So that lateral olfactory stria is going to that piriform cortex, so that whole area there, which has things like gyrus ambiens, lamen insulae, and all kind of little funny little things are down in that area. But the lateral olfactory stria end also primarily on what structure? The lateral olfactory stria end on primarily on what? Anyone in here? Anyone? Where's the lateral olfactory stria ending? Alright, that's where, and that's very important. Okay, so very important is that the what? The amygdala is a part of the limbic system. Isn't that a critical part of the limbic system? And the amygdala has two parts that are very different to it. Reasonable? Okay, there is the medial part of the amygdala and the ventrolateral part. There's a dorsomedial part of the amygdala, sometimes called the medial part, and there is a larger ventrolateral part. The larger ventrolateral part is where all of this input is going into. But the medial part is purely for what? Olfaction. So the lateral olfactory stria end in the what? Medial nucleus of the amygdala. Okay? So the smell, so that's a rhinencephalon. So in very primitive animals, smell becomes what? Very, very important. Isn't that so? All right. So the lateral olfactory stria are going to go into the medial. So the amygdala is a very, very important structure. Okay. All right. So ventrolateral part is going to detect more where there is danger or threat. Reasonable, and to respond to this danger or threat. The more medial part now has nothing to do with it. Medial part is what? To do with olfaction. Okay? But we're just having a little fun, relax. So this is the what? That is the uncus. Okay? Alright, then the uncus we said is the anterior end of the parahippocampal gyrus. Okay? That parahippocampal gyrus, question is it a part of the circle of Papez? Is that parahippocampal gyrus a part of the circle of Papez? Of course. Right, it's a part of the circle of Papez. Isn't that so? Okay? Because everything, where does everything begin in the limbic system? On the parahippocampal gyrus. Parahippocampal gyrus, we said, is very, very important. Receiving all the input from where? Where, Taylor?
From the cerebral cortex.
From the sensory association cortex. Reasonable? From the sensory association cortex. Okay? So all the input is going to go to from the sensory association cortex to this area, the parahippocampal area, and from there to what? To the hippocampus. And there are two roads that lead us from that parahippocampal gyrus to the hippocampus. And we stressed them last time we met, and we said one is a pathway that just boom, straight through. And that pathway is called the perforant pathway. The pathway is known as what? The perforant pathway. And then another path that curves around, and that path is called the alveolar pathway. Reasonable? All right. Okay, so our sensory association, that's where all the limbic input starts. Reasonable? All right. So John goes out to a party, and he sees this very hot looking young lady. Very good. John gets correspondingly hot. Reasonable? He starts to, react. You right, Michelle? He starts to what? To react, right? So the visual input, reasonable, etc., etc. Everything starts to get going. Reasonable? Right? Then she speaks some soft words in his ear. That even makes it worse. Reasonable? All right? And then he smells the aroma. Very good. All right? So all of these things are getting his what? His limbic system going. So feeding from the sensory association cortex. Reasonable? All right? He interprets what he is hearing and seeing and everything. Then to the what? Parahippocampal gyrus. There then to the hippocampus. Through two pathways, perforant and alveolar. The perforant and the alveolar pathway. Okay? And from there now we leave and we get into the fornix. Okay? So the alveus, reasonable, will form a band along the medial aspect of the hippocampus, which is known as the fimbria of the fornix. What does fimbria mean? A ribbon. Reasonable? It forms a ribbon band. Okay? And the fimbria of the fornix is going to collect all of that information from the what? From the hippocampus, isn't that so? And as the fimbria leaves the hippocampus, it becomes what structure? The crura. Okay? And the true crura will what? Unite inferior to the splenium of the corpus callosum, and in that area will be what? Some commissural fibers, the commissure of the hippocampus. Okay? And then now the fornix, the body of the fornix moves forward, as we see right here. That's the fornix moving forward. Isn't that so? And then now, when the fornix then as it's coming down, look, the fornix is coming like this. So there is a corpus callosum. Under the corpus callosum is a boy called the what? Septum what? Pellucidum. Reasonable? All right. Very good. Give me a wait. I want one more color. That green. Very good. All right. So that's the anterior commissure. Reasonable? Very good. So the fornix is coming down like this, then it's attached, and then it meets the what? The corpus callosum. And that is when it meets the corpus callosum, it divides into a what? A Y. Okay? It divides into a Y. And these fibers are going to the septal area. And these are referred to as what? Precommissural fibers. And those fibers that are postcommissural fibers are ending in the what? In the mammillary body. Reasonable? Those fibers are going into the mammillary body. Okay? So that anterior commissure is a very important structure. So in the lower animals, there is no corpus callosum. Right? And that is now taken over by the what? The anterior commissure. And when there is agenesis of the corpus callosum, the anterior commissure in some way compensates. Reasonable? But the anterior commissure is a very important structure. Okay? All right. Let's do this. Very good. Okay? Very good. All right. And then, let's finish the circle of Papez. We go up to the what? So from the mammillary body, remember we said we go via mammillothalamic tract of Vic Desar to the what? To the anterior nucleus of the thalamus. And from the anterior nucleus of the thalamus via a thalamocortical projection to the cingulate gyrus. Reasonable? We're going up to the cingulate gyrus. And all of these parts of the cingulate gyrus are associated with different functions. Reasonable? All right, so we said, for example, emotional pain, somatic pain, and etc. is in this area. So all of these parts are very important. Reasonable? Okay, so it goes up to the cingulate gyrus, right? And then from the cingulate gyrus, underlying it is a structure known as the what? The cingulum. Okay, so underlying this structure is a structure called the cingulum. Okay, well, I normally wouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it. Okay, so sometimes I do it. All right, so I'm going to take off a part of the what? The cingulate gyrus. Very good. Very good. And you can see it for yourself. Right, so sometimes I do this. All right, good. And you can see that underlying here is something like that. And you can lift it up and you can see how it's running. Reasonable? See that, Dr. Cruikshank? There. And this structure that's underlying it and running under here. See, I can get under with my forceps, look. See, I can get under here, and then that structure is known as the what? The cingulum. Okay? So that structure is the cingulum. And that cingulum is going to come right back around to the what? So, who is another important occupant of the tentorial area? Who is another important occupant of the tentorial area? So the parahippocampal gyrus, by the way, just lateral to the parahippocampal gyrus, there is this. Okay, so it's shown very nice here. There. Where's some black pins? There. Who is lateral to it? So when we look at the parahippocampal gyrus, boom, like that. That's the parahippocampal gyrus here, which is going to spread out as a what? An uncus. Isn't that so? Isn't that so?
Yeah.
Very important. And then there's a sulcus right here. And then that sulcus is lateral to it, is known as what? Collateral sulcus. Reasonable? Okay, then here there is a medial occipito temporal gyrus. Isn't that so? And lateral to it there is a lateral occipito temporal gyrus. Reasonable? But in this area though, this area here is called the what? That area there is called the what? So there's a little lady here, and you know, her name is who? What's her name? Her name is Melissa. No. Very good. Melissa, what's your last name there? Just relax. What's your last name? Lynn. Okay. Very. I'm just know first names, I don't know last names. Because I know the other names. Yes. So Melissa, look at that hard. Just look at his shape. Just relax, man. Relax. Alright. Very, very good. So look at that. So the pin is in a very important area. And what is that area? What is that area? And Melissa knows, you know. But Melissa is a very kind person. Very good. Melissa, what is that area there? And that's the fusiform. The fusiform gyrus. Okay, that's the fusiform gyrus. Okay? That's the fusiform gyrus. Isn't that so? So the examiner is going to ask you about the uncus, the parahippocampal gyrus, and he's going to ask you about the fusiform gyrus. Reasonable? That's a very, very important area. Okay? And that area basically is what serves what function, Melissa?
For recognition of faces.
Familiar faces. Isn't that so?
Familiar faces.
Right, especially familiar. Okay? So if you just seen the exam recognition of faces and put a recognition of faces. Alright, but more familiar faces. Reasonable? Okay? And that, and then when we get when things go wrong with it, what's that condition called? Prosopagnosia. And where is it? Where is the lack of recognition? Nausea is what? Nausea is knowledge. Agnosia is no knowledge. And prosopon is face. Very good. Prosopon Greek is face. So the prosopon, so the lack of knowledge of the face. Right? Still, John C. Fowler would be able to get along in his practice. Because he has periods. Isn't so John C. Fowler? Right, all right. So that is what? So that is the fusiform, okay? So, where is the input going to be coming from? Well, visual input is going to go to the primary visual cortex, and then from the primary visual cortex to the associant visual cortex, right? And then particularly now, faces are going to be taken down to the what? To the fusiform gyrus. They call fusiform area, fusiform gyrus. Reasonable? What structure will connect that? What's the connecting pathway? So what will connect it, right? So that you can therefore recognize. You will see goes to the association cortex, and then now I want to identify that face is so and so. Reasonable? All right. I'd give anybody gold if they can tell me. Who can tell me what connects, what carries information to the fusiform gyrus? So that you can recognize that's my father, that's my mother, it's my girlfriend. Reasonable? So what is going to be able to be there? And that is called the inferior longitudinal fasciculus. Right? So traveling in here will be a structure known as a what? The inferior longitudinal fasciculus. Reasonable? Okay. So hold on a second. We may get a cerebrovascular accident. Reasonable? That will mess that up. Okay. So which artery are we therefore talking about now? Which artery is responsible now for supplying the what? The tentorial area. Which artery is very important in supplying the tentorial area. Alright? If you ask John C. Fowler, he will tell you the posterior cerebral artery. Right? The posterior cerebral artery is a very important artery. Isn't that so? He's the terminal branch of what? The basilar artery comes off where? At the pontomesencephalic border, right in the interpeduncular fossa. Reasonable? As it arises, it's in relation to what? As the posterior cerebral artery arises, what is it in relation to?
Ocular motor nerve.
The ocular motor nerve. And as the posterior cerebral artery immediately starts on its journey, it immediately has to give off branches. Right? It has to give off a lot of branches. And where are those branches going to? We're talking the posterior cerebral artery. All right? Melissa, do you know the name of the young lady at the very end in the pink top?
Joel.
In the pink.
Oh,
What's your name, my dear?
Chantal.
Oh, Chantel, like my daughter. Okay, very good. Okay, very good. Okay, so we see this. So look. I've specially brought this brain because it's easy to see the things on. Reasonable? Chantel, it's just water and alcohol, sweetheart. You can hold it. I want you to hold. Look at it. Turn it like this because that's how they're going to put have it in the exam. Let these people see first. All right. Good. Very good. Excellent. So Chantal, where is the pin?
In the anterior perforated substance.
No, in the posterior perforated substance. Right. So that pin is in the what? Interpeduncular fossa, isn't that so? That pin is where? In the interpeduncular fossa. Isn't that so? Very good. That pin is in the what? The interpeduncular fossa. Right? That pin is in the interpeduncular fossa, which is bounded anteriorly by the what? Anterior laterally by the what? Optic tract. Posterior laterally by the what? Cerebral peduncular, crus cerebral basis pedunculi. Posteriorly by the what? Pons. Reasonable? Reasonable? So the what? The interpeduncular fossa is bounded anteriorly by the optic chiasm. What do we find in that chiasm? Adi, what do we find in there? Right in there. So we get the crossing of the nasal retinal fibers. What are we getting? The crossing of the nasal retinal fibers. So those nasal retinal fibers will come in and what? And cross. Reasonable? And those nasal retinal fibers, this is Libol, is picking up the what? The temporal field of vision. Isn't that so? That's picking up the temporal field of vision. Isn't that so? So when we start to compress it, what do we end up with? Well, we end up with what? Superior what? Bitemporal quadrantinopia. Isn't that it so? We're going to end up with a quadrantinopia, reasonable? And then now, when we get real compression, then we'll end up with a full bitemporal hemianopia. Right? Remember how the fibers are traveling. So you first, those fields of vision, a quadrantinopia, superior bitemporal quadrantinopia, reasonable? Then we get a full what? Bitemporal hemianopia. Isn't that so? Isn't that so? All right. So the patient, when he has a pituitary tumor, then he will start to, when he's coming out of roads, right? He's coming out of the road, he's not able to see the what? The cars here and there. Isn't that so? And also, when he's going around corners in his house, he's going to be what? His temporal field of vision is going to be what? Hold on a second. No. Later on, no. So person is now coming out of roads and getting into what? A lot of accidents. So his peripheral vision is knocked out. And then now he gets up in the night, he's starting to pee a lot. Isn't that so? He's getting what? Diabetes, what? Insipidus. Because he's going to be starting to affect the what? The hypothalamus. And one of the early ways is there's a lot of what? The diabetes insipidus. Isn't that so? So this area, very good, that we call the interpeduncular fossa, is bounded anteriorly by the chasm, anterior laterally by the what? The optic tract, posterior laterally by the cerebral peduncle, which we see there, like ropes, and posteriorly by the what? The pons. What's the immediate posterior relation of the chasm? So remember there, what do we get? The crossing of the what? Nasal retinal fibers. Isn't that so? The nasal retinal fibers. This optic tract is going to continue around. Oh, I have a beautiful specimen to show you. And you know, I left it out for this class today, which was in the other container, you know. It's a fantastic specimen. Yeah, and I wanted to show you. But anyway, this is going to come down and end now in the LGB. Reasonable? But not all fibers are going to go in the LGB. Some fibers are going to bypass in a structure called the superior, well, the fibers really enter and they go into a thing called, well, there is a superior brachium that we can say connects the LGB to the what? To the superior colliculus. Isn't that so? So connecting the LGB to the superior colliculus is the what? The superior brachium. Okay? And that superior brachium underlies a very important structure, and that's what I wanted to show you. And that structure is the what? The pulvinar of the thalamus. The what? The pulvinar of the thalamus. Right, reasonable? So there's a man by the name of Joe. Shall you know Joe? All right, leave it alone. So this is the anterior perforated substance. So right here is a big artery called the internal carotid artery. Reasonable? And the internal carotid artery gives off a very important branch which is going to supply the optic tract. And just like a train, it runs on a railroad of the tract. And what's that tract, that artery known as? The anterior choroidal artery. Which artery? The anterior choroidal artery. It is a what kind of artery? It is very important. The anterior choroidal artery. Who is he a branch of? A direct branch of the internal carotid. And he's going to supply the optic tract. And he will supply all the structures in the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. So he therefore supplies the hippocampus. He supplies the what? Hippocampus. Is that important? Very important. All of our memories are made up on the hippocampus. Isn't that so? So that anterior choroidal tract is very, very important. That anterior choroidal, he supplies the optic tract, which is very crucial. Then from the optic tract, he's going to supply the amygdala. He then gets through the choroidal fissure and gets into the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle, where he's mainly the source of blood supply to the hippocampus. Then he's going to supply the fimbra, he's going to supply the tail of the caudate nucleus, he's going to first supply the stria terminalis. Right? So that's very, very important. So that artery is a super important artery. What's the name of that artery? Anterior what? Choroidal artery. That's an anterior choroidal artery, which is very, 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 very important. Okay, that's the anterior choroidal artery. Okay, just give me a chance here. Just a minute. Just give me a minute. Just need a minute. Relax, relax, relax. Okay, 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 okay. Wait a while. Wait a while here. Okay, so I'm getting down into this area. That's right down here. Wait a while. Give a while. So I think I see the boy. See him? I think that this is it, this guy coming off right here. But I have a better specimen. I don't like this one. A better specimen to show him, but comes directly from the what? The the what? The internal carotid. Okay, so we're looking at the tentorial surface of the brain, right? And very important. And then what is this guy that is a bit prominent here? A very, very prominent guy, you know. Very prominent guy right here. Yeah, this is a really a very, very prominent guy. So he's unusually prominent. Right? But his brain is a little strange anyway. Right? So it's a very... So what would we find? Dr. Krupchan, you can just take it. What do you see? What do you see? All right. All right, let's look at this. Okay. Anybody tell me what I'm looking at right here? There. Of course, one half is missing, isn't that so? One half is missing. Okay. But if you can identify it from here, then that's very good. Okay, if you can identify it from here, then that's good. Yeah. What part of the brain is this? What part of the brain is this? This part. So I could take this slice right out of here. So if I took a slice like this, and I took a slice like this, and pulled it out. So what I'm looking at is the occipital lobe. Okay, this is a part of the what? The occipital lobe. Okay, this is a part of the what? The occipital lobe. It's very nice. Okay, part of the occipital lobe. Okay, so you can just, with your mind, create another one here. Isn't that so? We can just create another mind. Why is this tint like right here? Because the cerebellum lives under here. Isn't that so? So when we look at this surface, we can see the shape of the surface. You see that? So the cerebellum is right here. So the tentorium cerebelli is here. Now why this is such a beautiful brain or beautiful occipital lobe is this? Oh, again, should come back.
Oh, wait. I think, was that the end of the generator?
Okay.
I think the generator came on the first time, didn't it?
Yeah.
That might be the end.
Give a chance.
Okay.
When did it start? So maybe they have a backup reserve tank, you know. Yeah, so there's no siphon it, so they're in the what? The final reserve tank. In that last reserve tank, no?
Jinx it.
This is the alarm. We will continue, right? You agree? Okay. So this is a diamond specimen. Right? That's why I kept it. So this is diamonds. So you understand how this is? So this is just a what? A coronal section. A coronal section taken out of where? Just like I take it like this. Take a slice and pull it out. Reasonable? Alright? So we could just create the other half there. Okay? So therefore this is the posterior horn of the lateral ventricle. Right? And therefore, who is that very important structure? Strange, if you look at it like that, you don't see. You have to put it down flat to really see it. Okay? So let's look at it over here. So you can look at it. No. We way at the back. We are at the back. Let me see if I have a specimen that is like that. Is this that? Let's see if we have anything. Beautiful. There are some beautiful things right here. Right, I know this is for Taylor Swift. Very good. Wow, this is really lovely. Oh, and Taylor is going to love this.
Aren't you on this?
Do that white band, Taylor.
This?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's alright, don't worry. So we're just relaxing, okay? We're just relaxing. But I know Taylor, sorry. Sorry. I know Taylor would love that.
That white thing there.
Yeah,
The little white thing?
that little white thing.
Is that the subsalaric nucleus?
No. It's an electrical cord. It's a connection.
Straight.
And that's the mammillothalamic tract of Vic Desar. Just relax yourself. Very good. Okay. So the way we got to this is that I was showing you a section of the brain. Where is that section? There. Where's the little section? Where's that little section?
I'm not.
Give a chance. Just gonna go back up.
Yeah.
Where's that section? Excellent. So you see where this is from? There. You see it? Perfect fit. Very good. So there. So there's so many things right here. There are lots of beautiful things. There's a lot of beautiful things right here. This is a beautiful what? Splenium of the corpus callosum. Alright. Taylor Swift, what is that in red? Just relax.
Okay.
There and there and there. Okay, so what is that thing? What is that thing?
Is it
There. It looks like a pillow.
pulvinar?
Pulvinar of the thalamus. It's shaped like a what? Pillow. Right, rest your head gently on the pillow. Very good. Right, Melissa? Very good, all right? So this is the pillow-like structure. And that pillow-like structure is the what? The pulvinar of the thalamus. Has rich connections with LGB and MGB. Right? Rich connections with what? LGB and MGB. Okay? Just relax. This, let's put it back again. There. So, there, Addy. So that, love, is the bread and butter of your exam. What is it? The bread and butter of your exam. Okay? And that is the optic radiation. Okay? The what? The optic radiation. Reasonable? So in your exam, you're going to see this is the what? That is the cerebellum. The reasonable? That's the splenium of the what? The corpus callosum. Reasonable? And in there is the what? The posterior horn of the lateral ventricle. And then in red, because it's so super important, is that big structure. That's lateral to it. And that big structure is called the what? The optic radiation. Reasonable? The what? Optic radiation. And just medial to the optic radiation, you find a little structure there, just medial to it. Sorry, medial to it. So label it. So this area is the what? The posterior horn of the lateral ventricle. So this is the what? Occipital lobe. As this is a cross section, reasonable? And this is the what? Posterior horn of lateral ventricle. And then the big structure that we see as a band, rectangular band, is the what? Optic radiation. The optic radiation is also known as what? What's another name for it? Geniculocalcarine tract. Reasonable? And then just medial to it. Who lies medial to it? And you know who knows? Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, what is it? And it's beautifully developed here. What lies just lateral to it? Just relax. Who is just lying lateral to it? So therefore this is a tentorial surface. Isn't that so? So that's a tentorial surface. So therefore right about here very important. So I'm using this big black pin here, right about in there. Bloom. In there. That space is occupied by the inferior longitudinal fasciculus. Reasonable? That area is occupied by the inferior longitudinal fasciculus, carrying information from the occipital lobe into the temporal lobe. Reasonable? And feeding on a lot to the what? To the fusiform gyrus. Reasonable? So that we can transmit phases. Okay? So phases are very important things. Okay? Alright, so it's going to transmit particularly phases. So that in yellow once again is the what? So this is the posterior horn of the lateral ventricle. Then we see what lies lateral to it. I know Taylor Swift. No, Taylor, who is lying lateral to it, love?
And the yellow piece?
Yeah, no, just right here. There. Let's get some green pins. It's having fun, just relax. So just along there. It's very well developed. Very, very well developed. Okay, can't be better developed in this brain. It's beautiful. There. So just medial to the optic radiation. Medial to the optic radiation. I know Taylor Swift, Taylor knows. Medial to the optic radiation. But hold it. Because if you hold it, and look at it, it makes it's part of the whole learning thing. Reasonable? Take those green pins out, Melissa. Good. So this is how you're learning, That's all a part. So this is going into our neurons feeding in, Very good. Put them back. Very good. Alright? And it's medial to that rectangular area. Taylor Swift, what is it known as? You know. What is it? Starts with a letter T. Tapetum or tapetum. Right. And these are fibers from the what? Splenium of the corpus callosum going into the occipital lobes. That area is known as the tapetum or the tapetum. Reasonable? So you can see it, and it lies medial. Alright? So when we look at it, we must have a drawing, Let's say this is how you tell the back of the brain. It has this what? The shape, isn't that so? Because the shape is for what? The cerebellum to fit in here. Reasonable, and it has a what? Posterior horn. Reasonable? Alright, and then lateral to the posterior horn is the what? A rectangular thing called the what? Optic radiation. Reasonable? And then separating it here. Very good, Adi. Oh, very good. Is a tapetum. See, and this is coming from the what? The splenium of the corpus callosum fibers. Reasonable? Alright? Very good. Excellent. Okay? Oh, so if you carry home this, that's good. Okay? You want to carry home something. Okay, so when we look at this picture now, look here at this picture now. So when we look at this picture here, we see a brain that is like, we can turn it like this, isn't that so? There. So this is the what? That's the frontal pole.
Not another paper.
No. Because I want to put these diagrams here. Then I see the what? The what? The internal capsule. There, isn't that so? Then I see the what? The thalamus is here. Isn't that so? This is the what? Lentiform nucleus out here. This is the head of the caudate. Let me give a chance. And then this is the what? Coming around here is the what? Here. And then we see the fibers coming around like this. Okay, so this in red. Where is the red? Here. This is the optic radiation. Okay, so we can identify there. Is this lateral? This lateral. So see the optic radiation. So watch it coming around here. So look here. There. See it here? Okay. See it here coming around?
Yeah.
And there, see the tapetum here?
The grey one.
The grey looking matter. But the tract that comes around like that, big like that, is the what? The optic radiation, which is in yellow. So you have something to take a picture of this? No, you take a
Keisha.
picture of it.
Keisha will.
Where is your thing? You can take a picture of that?
I can't.
Right.
How's my voice going?
No, 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 no.
Yeah,
I have my reasons. Take a picture of it. That is very stubborn. Very good. Wait a while. There. There. So we see the optic radiation in what? In a horizontal section and in the what? Coronal section. Reasonable? Give a chance. Alright. And we can see it in this one here too. Okay. There. See the bug up? There. Tough look. Okay. Take another picture. Very good. So what are we taking pictures of? Optic what? Radiation. There. So we see it in a coronal section and in a horizontal section. Okay? Now, this is beautiful. I'm going to give Joel something. Joel, just relax. So I started off with some limbic, and then I'm going here. So, and here, okay. Now this is really this is a hard one, This is not so easy. This is a bad boy. Okay, this is a bad boy. Here. You want to get any None of my colleagues want to drink tea from my office again. Right? They put prions or something in my office. They don't want a prion tea. Okay, very good. All right. So there. So Taylor, this is really a rough one. Hold it up. Right. Very good. Excellent. So we're just having a little fun, Didn't I say this was a nice specimen? Here? Okay. Now we usually get a cross section. Let me see if I have one here. I'm looking for. Okay. So watch this thing again. Is that to show these people a million times, that this one is for only one person here, and that is Taylor. Very good. Okay. Taylor, what is that pin in?
Optic track.
Optic tract, 300 marks. Very good. Here. That is in the optic tract. See it there?
Yes, I got
Just it's in that little corner. Okay? Okay, no. Let me get back. Okay, so that is in that's a vein, that's a thalamus striate vein. And that's the body of the caudate nucleus becoming the tail. Alright. Let me get back down. Okay. Alright. Just with that. So here we can see the what? The hippocampus. Reasonable? There we see the what? Parahippocampal gyrus. Reasonable? Okay. Here we see the collateral sulcus. Okay, those are all those structures there. Okay. Now I want to turn our attention to a new topic. I want to do a topic with you now. Okay? Let's do a topic. Okay? It could be a topic that anyone sitting in here has to, well, everybody here sitting in here has to know. Joel has to know that topic. These people have to know that topic. Everyone has to know it. Okay? Alright, so we start that topic by identifying this and this. Okay? Alright, being red is what we want to talk about. This. And just to say that there are some little structures, make sure you have a picture of this. So there's some structures here. Bugger. Whole heap of little structures are right up here. Look how they're clustered. Okay. There. Okay, there. Okay. Who wants it?
Sorry.
Who wants it? Who'd like this one? Who wants it? Who wants it? Okay. Keisha. So the red is in what? The thalamus. The black is in what? The what have we called it? Can I use it? Sorry, let's get a diagram. We need some colors. Can you open this? Leave it open. Excellent. Just leave it open.
Did it fall?
Give a chance. No, but this green is no good. Discard it. Very good. Very good. Very good. So this is the what? The thalamus. So this is a sagittal section through the brain. Reasonable? This is the thalamus. Reasonable? Okay. Then that's the head of the caudate nucleus. Reasonable? Head of the caudate nucleus. Once it starts to get involved with the thalamus, it becomes the what? The body. Reasonable? The body. Okay? And then once it leaves the thalamus, it becomes the what? The tail. Reasonable? The tail swings around. Okay, so this is all what? The head. That's the body. And becomes the tail. And the tail of the caudate nucleus ends in what? The amygdala. Right? The tail of the caudate nucleus is going to end here in the amygdala. Okay? Alright. Then, traveling with the tail of the caudate nucleus and coming from the amygdala is what structure? The stria terminalis. Okay, the stria terminalis, which comes around. And that stria terminalis is going to end in the what? In the septal area. And who is going to be following this structure? Thalamus striate vein. Very good. So the thalamus striate vein is going to come around. Reasonable? Okay. Then now on top of this we can fit the what? The what? The lateral ventricle. That's the anterior horn. That's the body. That's the posterior horn. And that is the inferior horn. Reasonable? And then underlying this structure is the what? The hippocampus. So this is the what? That's the hippocampus. Reasonable? Okay, so this is a space up here. This all space is the what? The lateral ventricle. Isn't that so? So that space is the lateral ventricle. So these structures are in the roof of the inferior horn. So we can put a man to stand in here. Very good. And he can stand in here. Reasonable? So what is in the floor is in the roof. So these structures are in the roof of the inferior horn. These structures are in the floor of the body of the lateral ventricle. Reasonable? And we said this green structure here, this is all the what? The thalamus. Okay. Now just running along from the septal area and coming back here is this stria medullaris thalami, which is going to end in what structure? The habenular nucleus. Okay. Whose is it? Very good. Okay. All right. So there we can see the thalamus. There is the what? Body of the caudate nucleus. And this vein is the what? Thalamus striate vein. And right here that would be the stria terminalis. The stria terminalis runs in the groove between the what? The caudate nucleus and the what? And the thalamus. Right, so sometimes you can actually see it in there. But in that specimen, no, I'd have to look at another sagittal section. Okay? The thalamus. Now, I was just telling you something. See, we can sit from one thing quickly to another thing. I'm going to come back to the topic that I really want to get into. But let me just finish off by going back again to here. Because we said that I just said, we're saying that the basilar artery ends there. Just before it ends, it's going to give rise to a superior cerebellar artery and a posterior cerebral. And we said that the posterior cerebral has its first relation with the what? With the third nerve. Right? So the optic tract is going right over the cerebral peduncle, isn't that so? The superior cerebellar artery and the posterior cerebral. Okay? And the third nerve is just coming out right here. Okay? Let us see. The third nerve. Ah, there is the third. Wow, this is beautiful. So Melissa, look hard. Are you looking hard, Melissa?
Yes, sir.
You see the third nerve right here? And see it's between two arteries. The superior cerebral and the posterior cerebral. So there you can see the third nerve, and that's the superior cerebellar artery, and that's the posterior cerebral. Right, so the third nerve is just in between these two. And we can see the posterior communicating. See the posterior communicating? Alright, that's right. No, that posterior cerebral artery, as it comes off, it has to start to work. Alright, what are the first arteries it gives off? What are the first arteries that it gives off? Posterior cerebral. We need somebody who works in the what? In the cranial vault, in the brain and all of that. Do we have anybody here sitting down like that? Very good. So Dr. Cruikshank, what about it? What about it? So the posterior perforated substance is very important. It is the entrance to where? Which arteries are going through there? What's the name of those arteries? Very important arteries that are given off. And it just shoot up to supply that structure. And that's they're supplying the thalamus. And those are the thalamo-perforating arteries. Right? So the thalamo-perforating arteries from the posterior cerebral and the posterior communicating. Right? Then we also get thalamo-geniculate arteries to the geniculate bodies. The thalamo-geniculate arteries. So we see that the posterior cerebral artery is supplying a lot of the visual system. It's supplying the thalamus. It is supplying the tentorial surface. Reasonable? Okay. And then now it's supplying part of your internal capsule. It's supplying the tentorial, it's supplying the occipital lobe. Isn't that so? The posterior cerebral artery is very important. But the posterior cerebral artery gives rise to what are called the thalamo-perforators. Okay. All right. So yeah, I want to discuss a topic with you. And that topic, I can pick anything. I want to pick the thalamus. Okay? So what about the thalamus? What about the thalamus? What about it? What about the thalamus? But before doing the thalamus, I'm going to show you a very important structure. This one is so important it isn't funny. Okay, that. Okay? I put it right in it. Alright, so two people are sitting on my right. And there's 1,000,000% so that they will be asked this in their exam. Very good. So at the whole. Just hold at the very good. Here. Right? And when we look at that structure, we see it is at the rostral or superior extent of the aqueduct of Sylvius. Right? Be careful of this being rostral. Right? So, and we see it's a knob-like structure, sort of cylindrical. Right? Sort of looks like this in cross-section, look like this. Okay? And if the pineal recess, you can see the pineal gland above it, and the pineal recess, okay? All right, it's in relation to that pineal recess, just anterior and inferior to the pineal recess. And that's a very important structure. So when you shine a light in somebody's pupil, and the other pupil constricts, right? So that's the structure involved. And that structure is known as what? Posterior commissure. Right, that structure is the what? The posterior commissure. Alright? You see, Taylor, you think I've shown them some important things for their exam? Yes or no? Very good. Alright. Take it out. Very good. Put it back in gently. Very good. And you see the relation to the superior colliculus? Yes. Very good. Alright? So there is the what? The posterior commissure. You can hold it up. Chantal. Very good. Okay, so the thalamus. Let's just spend 5 minutes on the thalamus. Okay? Alright. Now just to show you before the thalamus, I'm just showing you some things, you know. Alright? Just to say that what? This is a nice section through the brain. And I'm going through the brain stem. Isn't that so? Alright, this is the pons. Yes. So if that's the pons, then above here, between these two pins are the what? The midbrain. We see substantia nigra, yes. You saw this is the what? That's between those two pins is the midbrain. Okay? Alright. So in the midbrain, so therefore these are the inferior colliculi. How we know that those are not the superior colliculi? Where are those inferior colliculi?
No red nucleus.
There is no red nucleus. Right? So if it were at the level of the inferior colliculus, Melissa, you'd find the 2 red nuclei here. But watch here.
The superior.
Watch here, sweetheart. But rather than the red nucleus, we're seeing a white rectangular structure in the center. Okay, so see there, rather than seeing 2 red nuclei, we're just seeing a rectangular structure. Okay? That rectangular structure is very important. Okay, so it's replaced by that rectangular structure. At the level of the superior colliculus, we'd find 2 red nuclei. Okay? Alright? But there are no 2 red nuclei there. Okay, there is just this big white band in the middle. So watch here. So this is at the level of the superior colliculus. Reasonable? So at the level of the superior colliculus, there is something called substantia nigra and 2 red nuclei. So this is at the level of the superior colliculus. At the level of the inferior colliculus, right? We see a little substantia nigra left back here, but then there's a big rectangle that's white. So there's a white rectangle. Reasonable? And that tells you, and the aqueduct is here, and the aqueduct is there. Okay? And that white rectangle is what?
Decussation of the superior cerebellar.
Decussation of the superior cerebellar peduncle. That's called the what? The decussation of the superior cerebellar peduncle. Reasonable? So therefore this is the inferior colliculus right here. Okay, that's the aqueduct of Sylvius with the periaqueductal gray. And there below this level, where are we in this level here? What is that? Where are we? Look at it and tell me where we are. What's that orange pin placed in? What is that orange pin placed in? What is that orange pin placed in? So that orange pin, right? So there is a pons. Reasonable? You agree? That's a pons, and the pons has 2 parts. The orange, which corresponds to this, and a part at the back called the tegmentum. Reasonable? Reasonable? So we see the pons there divided into the basilar portion and the tegmental portion. And in orange right there is the cross-section through the basilar portion. Okay? And when we examine that basilar portion, what do we observe?
Transverse.
We just see the fibers crossing like this, right? What does pons mean in Latin? Pons. Pons. Bridge. Right there, bridges. Reasonable? Right? That's the pons is the bridge. Okay? Alright, so there you can see. And then if Taylor is looking, you know, Taylor, you see all these things here, love? Look. You see all these little circles? You see there are many little circles? Yeah, man, you can see all these little circles here. You see all of them there?
Oh, yeah.
See all those little circles in there? What are all those circles in there? Pontine nuclei. Those are the nuclei pontis. Right? The nuclei pontis. Okay, those are the nuclei. Wow, this is such a beautiful section. This is a fantastic section. If you're anything to do with neurosurgery or ophthalmology or anything like that, look at the leisure vessels that are coming around here. You see that leisure vessels? You see there, are the yes or no?
Yes.
Very good. All right, see the leisure vessels winding around? Okay. So that's the nuclei, the pontine nuclei. So let's get back and discuss the thalamus. So we can see this is a beautiful specimen here, showing the what? That's the thalamus there, and there we can see the body of the caudate nucleus. See it right there? You see the caudate nucleus just coming around. You see it there? Crystal clear.
You can just tap to focus.
All right. So there is the thalamus. All right. So what about the thalamus? So what's the shape of the thalamus? What's it? And the thalamus, the main overriding function of the thalamus is what?
Sensors.
What's the main overriding? We have there's another drink there, is there? Yes. We have to talking and talking, you know. The brain is consuming also a lot of what energy. So it is the great sensory relay station, isn't that so? So all of the input, anything that wants to go to the cortex, must what? Relay in the thalamus, isn't that so? Anything that is going from the cortex must relay in the thalamus. The only thing, thanks John, the only thing that is not relaying is the what? Is the what? Is olfaction. But olfaction is still going to get to the thalamus, but after. Thanks, Sir John. So the thalamus. So John, there you see the thalamus. Shaped like a what? What's the shape of the thalamus? Anything you can relate the thalamus to shape what? What's it shaped like? An egg. Very good. An egg. Reasonable? So the thalamus is like shaped like a what? An egg. Isn't that so? The thalamus is shaped like a what? An egg. All right, give it a chance. So the thalamus is shaped like an egg. And its long axis is what? Oblique. Right? So if we're looking down on it, it's like this. And this is the MGB. And that's the LGB. Reasonable? All right? And it has within it what? What does it have within it? The internal medullary lamina. Which is going to what? Bifurcate. Reasonable? Dividing it into what? And this is the midline here. This is the interthalamic adhesion. So here is the what? The third what? Ventricle. Right? This space up here is the what? Aqueduct. This is, sorry, the foramen of Monroe. Isn't that so? And the foramen of Monroe is bounded anteriorly by the what? Anterior column of the fornix. Reasonable? So there, that is the anterior column of the fornix right here. Isn't that so? You all right? Okay, so it's going to divide it into a large medial nucleus, sometimes called the dorsomedial nucleus. Okay? Then it's going to have a what? An anterior nucleus, and then the lateral nucleus. Then in the internal medullary lamina will be two nuclei. And these are the centromedian and the parafascicular. Reasonable? Then back here we're getting the MGB, and we're getting what? LGB. One's called the metathalamus. Okay. Now when we look at it, when we're viewing, now what structure lies right here? What is that structure there, laterally?
The reticular nucleus.
Well, the reticular nucleus, but more larger than this. That's the internal capsule. That's the lenticular thalamic part of the internal capsule. And as you said, the reticular nucleus is
In between.
here. So who lies right here? The lentiform nucleus. Isn't that so? And this would be the what? Globus pallidus. Reasonable? Now the lateral nucleus. When you view the lateral nucleus like you're looking at it from the side, remember we're looking at a cross section through, this is a horizontal section. This is a what? Horizontal section, okay? So when we view the nucleus, the lateral nucleus, when we view the lateral nucleus, it has a what? A dorsal tear and a ventral tear. A dorsal tear and a what? A ventral tear. So the lateral nuclear group is a double-decker bus. All right? And this is lateral dorsal, lateral posterior, pulvinar. Reasonable? Okay. Then when we look at so this is a dorsal tear. When we look ventral tear, what will the nuclei be? Beautiful. VA, VL, and VP. VP subdivided into VPM and VPL. Right? So the dorsal lateral nucleus that we see here is a double-decker bus, having a dorsal tear and a ventral tear. Lateral dorsal, lateral posterior, pulvinar. Then, so these are called sometimes non-specific nuclei. Okay? These are very, very specific. So the ventral tear of the lateral nucleus, the ventral tear of the lateral nucleus, these are very what? Very specific. VA, VL, VP. VA equals what? VA equals what? Basal ganglia. VL equals what?
Cerebellum.
New
Yeah, cerebellum.
cerebellum. And then we know about VPL and VPM. Okay? Or let's hold that now. Okay. The VA nucleus. What's the function of the VA nucleus? We said basal ganglia, but what's the real? Well, how do you see it? What's to elaborate? What is the VA nucleus serving? The VA nucleus serves as the relay station for the basal ganglia up to the cortex. Reasonable? So the VA is serving as a relay nucleus. So when basal ganglia has done everything it has to do, it wants to return the information back up to the cortex. Where will VA project to?
Premotor area.
Motor, very important. Motor, premotor, and supplementary motor cortex. So VA is going to project to motor, premotor, and supplementary motor cortex. Reasonable? What are the inputs to VA? VA is going to get, what are the inputs? Well, that input is really called the palidothalamic. Isn't that so? So we're getting the palidothalamic, right? So now, just dependent on these receptors here, we can get hyperkinetic movements or hypokinetic movements. So there can either be poverty of movement or they're hyperkinetic movements. Reasonable? All right? So there is a competing, so there are internal loops and there are external loops. So globus pallidus, which is getting very important from substantia nigra, reasonable, so there are negro fibers going up and all that sort of stuff, but also the substantia nigra is itself projecting to the what? To the VA nucleus. Okay? All right. So they are nigrothalamic. Okay? No, but this VA we said is primarily getting from where? Palidothalamic. Isn't that so? And the palidothalamic come by way of two things. And what are the two pathways? And there's a little lady named Keisha. And she knows. So Keisha, one thing just goes like this, boom, right through the internal capsule. So where's that picture of the internal capsule? There. So one of them will come from the globus pallidus and just go like this, boom, straight into VA. Just like that, zoom, straight across. Right? And that's called the lenticular fasciculus. So there's one of them called the lenticular fasciculus, and there's another one that loops down, and that boy is called the what? The ansa lenticularis. Reasonable? Okay, so after basal ganglia has received all its input, right? So from the caudate nucleus, so this is the head of the caudate nucleus here, all right? Okay, so there are 4 major afferents to the caudate nucleus, and what are the 4 major afferents?
Corticostriate.
So,
Cortical.
first of all, we need gas in the car, right? Without the car can't go anywhere, so we need the dopamine, isn't that so? So that is coming from the pars compacta of the what? The substantia nigra. Okay, where else?
Corticostriate.
From large areas of the cortex, isn't that so? So the corticostriate fibers are very important, and then the corticostriate fibers are traveling down in the what? In the a lot of them are traveling in the external capsule, right? So the external capsule. So sometimes the neurosurgeons have to go here. There are a lot of tumors, etc., involving this overlying area called the insula. So the neurosurgeons do a lot with the insula. So there a lot of their life is in the insula. So they have to know how to get in right there. So they have to know the anterior insular point and the posterior insular point. Reasonable? So there's a lovely young lady named Dr. Cruikshank, right? So she's going to be operating a lot here, okay? And she's going to find the Sylvian point. She's forever finding the Sylvian point. And she's looking for the pars orbitalis, the pars triangularis, and the pars opercularis. Right? So she's looking at the stem of the lateral sulcus, where it divides into its 3 rami, an anterior ramus, an ascending ramus, and the Sylvian fissure, which is the posterior ramus. And she gets into there, and she looks in there. Look. And when she looks in there, she sees there are short insula gyri and long insula gyri. And all of these gyri emanate from a point. And that point is way down here, there, right here. So there's Dr. Cruikshank, you open it up right there and look right there. Take that brain and look at it. There. So that point is known as what point? So that's a magical point for her, you know. And who will be assisting you in your surgery? T. Mackenzie, right? Very good, all right? And that is called the Lyman insulae. That point is called the what? The Lyman insulae. So that's right down in there. That area where everything is coming from is called the what? Lyman insulae. Very good. All right. So where are we now? So that to the caudate nucleus and to the putamen. Caudate nucleus and putamen are one, right? Histocytoarchitecturally, cytotectonically, chemical receptors, everything, they are one. Reasonable? And those 2 together are called the what? The neostriatum or the striatum. Okay? Corpus striatum equals what?
Lentiform plus
Lentiform and caudate. But striatum is putamen and caudate. And there are 4 afferents, major afferents. 1 from the pars compacta of the substantia nigra, the nigrostrial pathway. 2 corticostriate, which is coming from the where? From the large areas of the cortex, but especially reciprocally connected with the what? With the frontal, because the frontal is dealing with what? With movement, isn't that so? Very important. So motor, supplementary motor, and premotor. All right. 3. What's the third one? Thalamus striate. From which nuclei of the thalamus? This big boy. The dorsomedial nucleus, and also the central median and parafascicular
Parafascicular.
nuclei. Okay? All right. That's 3, 4
Amygdala striate.
from the amygdala striate. Isn't that so? All right. So all of these are going into the. Which nucleus are we discussing? VA. Where's the diagram? Where's VA? Very good. All right. So VA is the relay station for basal ganglia input to the cortex. Reasonable? So pallido-thalamic, nigrothalamic. Reasonable? All right. Once you get to the VA, you want to get to motor, premotor, and supplementary motor. Right? So there's a man by the name of who? John. John put a pin in the supplementary motor cortex. Where is supplementary motor cortex? On this specimen. Where is supplementary motor cortex? Where is supplementary motor cortex? So look, John, where is supplementary motor cortex? See, I'm trying to help John. Am I helping him good? I'm helping him good, yes or no?
Yeah.
Very good. So where's supplementary motor cortex? John, remember you have a big neurological office operating and you don't want to supplement. Something wrong? What is it? Give a chance. Wait, let me just say a word. John, you have supplement.